Good day, my name is Graham Gordon Thomas and I am the rational environmentalist. Now, I want to discuss something that ought to be discussed. What is Australia actually doing about climate change, about the climate it already has? Now, anyone who studied geography will know that Australia is drying out from the centre because of the continental climate. What he can do about that, well, he can do lots about anything really, but it's a matter of engineering and science, putting in the systems to put the hydrology in as the water systems through the country so it can grow and develop its potential. But so far Australia, after all these years and billions of dollars spent on wind farms and all the other things, solar panels, and all the other things it's subsidising and creating poverty for, it's done nothing whatsoever about the climate problem. If there's a climate crisis, what you have to ask yourself, what is the crisis? What is the problem? What is the problem? There is no climate crisis. This is the silliest thing I've ever heard. But what is the problem? The problem is making sure you grow enough food to feed your population. You make sure people have housing what's substantial and warm enough and keeps the drafts out and keeps people comfortable. And make sure there's enough growing, the economy is growing so that you can continue to employ people who are coming out of school and out of education. Now, Australia has done exactly the opposite to what it ought to have been doing if there's a problem with the climate that may affect its population later. In fact, the approach it's taken means that more and more people will suffer in the meantime and now. And as you're not going to change that, it's going to be more and more people are going to become poor over the next 20-30 years because of the policies they have or that are in place in Australia. Because if Australia was serious, Australia's a very dry continent. And if it was serious about what it could have done about climate change, it would have taken the approach that many of us or some of us suggested 20 years ago. And that is, it would have began to employ people. There's a surplus of people unemployed, many of them sitting in jails because of drug crimes and stupidity. Now, they could have been employed and the money spent on creating the water systems, using windmills to then create precipitation units or condensation units that then take the water out of the air. That's number one of the ideas. Simple use of windmills is to make water out of the air, and the other people are doing this already. This is happening elsewhere. Also with solar, you can create steam with solar and drive water through pipes and transfer water. You can distill water and transfer it inland where you can put it in the rivers. Now, everyone says this is too expensive, but they've spent billions of dollars on solar and wind generators that do nothing but disrupt the economy anyway, and there's no productive gain from these things. If you spend your money on the most productive element of all, which is water, with a growing world population to feed, there has to be your most productive element. And water doesn't just do that, it provides all life. If you spent your money on that, then you'd be doing something real about the climate, and also assuring that the people in the future wouldn't be overly affected by any major drought. Because what does climate change mean? Well, it can mean either it gets more wetter and wetter, or it gets more and more drought, and the droughts become bigger and stronger and larger. Now, because Australia is such a small population, it cannot affect climate by reducing its emissions. It can't. It's physically, dynamically, totally impossible. Regardless of what anyone says, it's physically impossible. But they could have acted proactively by creating energy autonomy within towns. That is, people own the electricity or the solar and wind farms. The people own them, so then the power is used by them for their purpose, and they're not sent broke by sending them their money that the government pays them or they earn from work overseas. So the money you pay for your electricity bill stays in the town rather than go to somebody elsewhere. So the money just goes out of the country. It means that fewer people can be employed using the energy you produce, because it's an energy loss and therefore an economic loss. Because the money then when that money goes out of the country, the energy the wind generators produce is going out of the country. The energy solar panels use is going out of the country. This is a thing that people haven't quite worked out. Now, when it comes to doing something about climate, there were lots of things that could have been done that we wanted to discuss and debate, but you're not allowed to debate anything, because if you say, oh, hang on a minute, let's discuss the practical meaning of this, you're called a denier or a skeptic, and you get the people attacking you because you're an older man, and what would older men know about anything? Even though these young people have never done a science lesson or a geography lesson in their life, they are the experts now. I bet that's me just being sarcastic. The point is, they could have taken, and we can still begin to take, a totally different approach to the idea or philosophy of climate, so something real is done in a practical sense to provide the water and the cheap energy systems for the regions, so that if there is a climate problem in the future, people's lives aren't affected so much as they will be now by the systems that are in place that are causing redundancy, they're causing poverty, they're causing hardship, and all that money, it's worth repeating, all that money that is spent on wind generators goes overseas. The money you spend on wind generators, that's energy you have used, your energy to get that money, or the country's energy to get that money, goes offshore, vanishes in the wind. And then they've got to borrow more and more money and say, oh, we're having a deficit problem. Yes, the deficit is in planning by people with no practical experience, no engineering experience, no science background, and no understanding of the geography of Australia. They don't understand that this place is a dry continent and the drought is the biggest problem facing everyone. And if you're going to do something about a climate problem, you have to do something about make sure there's a continuous water supply, and that's where you would invest your money in, not wind generators per se, but the wind generators can be used to create water through condensation units, and to drive water around the country through the pipes and from the reservoirs you create. So you could create a massive amount of employment all over the place, building reservoirs and pipes to transfer water around. And also there are ways within this system to make sure you've always got growing enough cattle fodder to make sure if there's a drought that cattle are fed and farmers aren't jeopardised and stuff like that. So they're just handing farmers money every time there's a problem. No, do something practical. Use the energy in the wind naturally to create water through precipitation or condensation units. You can take the humidity out of the air and then hold it in reservoirs, and you can do a calculation that can give you exactly, tells you how much food per every 2 years you make out of that system, or how many cattle you can grow out of a wind generator. And that's the better use of wind generators rather than what they're doing now. So they've got to back them up with batteries, which basically, the one in South Australia is basically just a show. It's just to make the Premier feel a little bit better. That's all. It'll do nothing towards the bringing down the price of electricity, which is the important thing. And it does nothing whatsoever about the climate. about the climate, like I said, it's about making sure the economy grows so the people's lives aren't threatened by economic action. First, it's no good saying the climate's a problem and then causing hardship for people, which will only then add, if the climate is that climate crisis, whatever that is, what, a flood and a drought, well, Australia gets that anyway, but whatever it is, they're going to make it worse by impoverishing people first, and more people, through the policy they have. Because every time the wind blows, the money goes offshore. And that's what they're doing, vanishing the wind off the shore and vanishing the economy with it. That's what wind generators do. When you see the wind generators, don't think, oh Lord, energy saviors. No, no, energy drains. Straight offshore, though, it's like a vacuum sucking the money out of the country, which is the energy, to wherever the wind generators are made. There you go. And the more wind generators you have, the more coal you've got to export to pay for them. It's that simple. Anyway, there you go. Australia's done nothing so far whatsoever about climate change, and anyone who thinks it has really needs to, no, you could attack me all you like, I don't really give a damn, but better off doing a little bit of research, a little bit of facts, and understand that in physics, economy and energy are two exactly the same thing. What's an economic drain is an energy drain. So Australia now is draining its energy and its economy and doing nothing about a climate change when it could have been improving its energy, improving its economy, and doing something practical and productive about climate change. It's that simple. And some of us have been saying that for 20 years and ignored because, well, we're old, we don't know, we don't talk like a salesperson. If you don't talk like a salesperson, well, who's going to listen to you? Besides, who wants to hear the truth about climate change? No one. Speak the truth and you must be a skeptic. Well, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. As soon as you stop being skeptical, you become a clone or a drone or a zombie. Only zombies aren't skeptical or cynical.